We take on roles as fathers with the understanding that providing for our family is a key aspect of what we bring to the table. Now, providing for our family is one thing, creating a nest egg is totally another. And creating that nest egg says a lot about our values, including the kind of investments that we make. So it's important that we understand that our investing in our family goals, that they are in alignment with each other. And so to help us today is a man who's doing this for families and helping them get in alignment with their goals and their investments. And before we get into that, we know that being a man has never been more challenging than it is today. And so we recognize that this pain is real for many of us. It's the pain of loneliness and unworthiness, and it's masked by our anger and our resentment. And it's all because we are uncertain and afraid to take that next step. So if you're tired and fed up with where you're at, then I encourage you to start your hero's quest, where you can become more, accomplish more, and live more than ever before. Go to members.theawakenedman.net and use the coupon code RevolutionaryMan to receive 20% off your quest. And with that, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of the Awakened Man movement and your host, Alan DeMont. So let me ask you a couple of questions to get started. Do you invest in your family's future? And how do you go about choosing what to invest in? These are two really critical questions for us to get clear on, because without clarity and patience, achieving our financial goals is unlikely, and especially if we don't have a plan to get you there. Well, today, my guest has a few ideas on how to help you make that decision. Allow me to introduce my guest. Max Becker-Pause is a family guy who was born and raised in Vancouver, fellow Canadian, outstanding, who's lived 12 years in Korea and Japan and then navigated his way back to the side of the Pacific Rim. He's an avid consumer of spicy food and diehard ocean swimmer, both warm and cold. Right on, man. And an unstinking lover of animals and nature. Hot, frothy black coffee, and always a highlight of his for his independent financial advisor with more than 10 years in this industry. Max is big on giving back to the community so that he can share with all of us in the abundance of the amazing world that we live in. Welcome to the show, Max. How are things today, my brother?
Excellent, Alan. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I had a great little ocean swim down at Kitts Beach in Vancouver, if you know it.
Yeah, I've heard of that location. That's outstanding. Water can't be too bad today at this time of year, though.
It's always kind of bracing, even in the middle of summer. Yeah, we don't really get warm seas here in Canada, do we?
No, not at all. But better than January, that's for sure. So we're doing this here and getting into our summer months. Well, Max, as you know, in our work here at the Awakened Man, we're very big on everyone being on a hero's quest. And so my first question for you is to tell us about a time in your life when you knew things had to change. What did you do about that? And how did that experience shape you into the man you are today and the work that you're doing?
Well, I can get vulnerable, I guess. When I had to change was, as a younger guy, you'd kind of fool around. I mean, that's what younger guys do. And back when my wife got pregnant with twins, I just realized that, I got to take this seriously. I can't be a kind of guy to go to nightclubs or bars anymore. Like, that era of my life is over. And, I'd fooled around here and there and maybe not always been careful, like men are sometimes not careful. And I was just really, I had kind of a moment of panic, like, maybe I should have got tested. Are the kids going to be okay? Because my wife is pregnant with twins, and I got tested. Everything was fine, but that was a big moment of panic for me. And what I said is, if I come through this okay, and I did, and the twins are healthy when they're born, then the way I wanted to show my gratitude, I started sponsoring 2 girls in poor countries. The reason I chose 2 girls, I had 2 boys coming along the way, and girls always get the short end of the stick in developing countries, right? They're always the last ones to be educated and taken care of. So that I would say it was the defining moment in my life, and just getting serious about being a dad. And my kids are pretty grown up now. The twins are 18. The little one is almost 14. It's been really fun, the formative years. I would say I had really fun with them, a good time when they were little. now they're kind of moving on their own, but still the bond is strong.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that story, that part about, being, wild and a little bit crazy. And I can remember when my first wife and I were together and we were looking to have kids, and I finally had to decide. I had a 1982 Trans Am with the T-tops and the whole thing and the big decals and all that, big Smoking the Bandit fan. But I had to decide that, is this what I want to do? And is this how a father is? Like, my wife wasn't going to allow me to take the kids, in the back seat of that car, and I had to make a decision. Do I want the car or do I want my family? And the family obviously went out for it. And I think it's so interesting, as we're young guys, we have these aspirations and these other things in our mind. And then the reality of being a father or a pending father, and how that changes our mindset and our scope. And so, as you were telling that story, was the thing that came to me. And I really liked how you also talked about, sponsoring kids, 2 girls in developing countries. It's so true, right? They're the ones that end up by getting the least of the services, and they're the ones that really probably need some of the more so than the boys. So I'm grateful to hear that you're doing that. But as you think about your life today, Max, what would you say is alive and real for you in your life right now?
What's alive and real for me is mental fitness. I've been on a journey of that for the last few years. And mental fitness in a nutshell is the triumph of your positive emotions over your negative emotions. And in our minds, there's always that battle going on between the primal forces of fear and love. And every negative emotion can be traced to fear: fear of loss, fear of losing money, fear of sickness, fear of death, fear of being embarrassed, fear of being a failure. Anytime people are actually angry or full of hatred or any kind of negative emotion, it boils down to a kind of fear. COVID really showed that, pretty starkly, that look how people manipulate fear to make the populace do one thing or another. So I say that because it's really helped me over the last few years, and it's helped me get out of my own head. And a lot of misery is caused by being in our own head. And if I can get out of my own head and think about other people and how can I help them, that's so much more liberating than what kind of cappuccino do I want today? So, there's, especially me, I've naturally been kind of a selfish kid growing up. So I just getting out of that's been a transition for me. And that's why, you can see my company, Abundance Wealth Community. Community is everything, right? Community ties us together. So it starts with you, it starts with me. Let's make our communities better. And in my job, I help people with their finances. So if I can give people tools to improve their lives, and if I can help improve the community in doing so, then that's really a win-win for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely makes sense. Love that answer. And what I was just making a few notes here, and you had some really key stuff. And that the idea, that mental fitness of triumph over our emotions, right? And so true of that. It really boils down to two emotions, right? Or two pieces, two energies, as we like to talk about them. The energy of that fear and all the tightness and the strain with that. And then there's the other side of that spectrum, where it's love and it becomes more relaxing, and we can lean more into our purpose of who we are as men, and we can grow and develop. And so talk a little bit more about that for yourself and your journey, about moving from those things that you were fearful of before, and maybe even some things that you still have to work on today, but how that has really shaped and changed who you are today.
I'd say a big thing is letting go. And in fact, I was just at the beach yesterday, got ready for my swim, and there was a busker singing. Is it the Beatles who sang "Let It Be" or Paul McCartney? Yeah, and let it be. Like, why are we always trying to control life and hurt it and make it do something for us? Like, that's where the pain comes from, is really needing life to be a certain way, needing our partner to be a certain way, needing our kids to be a certain way, needing anything to be a certain way. And I mean, I'm almost 50 years old now, I'll be 50 in August, and you kind of wish it didn't take years and years of maturity for that to happen. But I wish this had happened earlier, but I'm definitely on that trajectory where, like, I can see the misery of life is caused by trying to control it. And I want to attract, I don't want to push. So if I can attract people who want to work with me, that's so much better than trying to push someone to work with me who might not be a good fit in my business.
Yeah.
There's just so much learning I've done. I'm just really, it just fills me with like a joy to know about the learning. Like, I can now stand in a line at the coffee shop for 10 minutes for the first time in my life. I don't pull up my phone. I just focus on my feet in my shoes. I focus on the sounds of the coffee shop. I get curious about the people around me, maybe strike up a conversation. Like I couldn't do that before. I was just anxious to be in my own skin. And I say I've really improved on that, if that
Outstanding.
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And and being able to model that experience for your children, is something that as many men we struggle with. We don't know how to do what what you were just describing. And I think that is such a key component of us really settling into our masculinity and growing our masculinity, because we become more comfortable in our skin, comfortable with who we are, what we stand for, what our values and our beliefs. And when we get to that position, then we can definitely flourish, and so do our families and our communities. So let's get into some of about your work there, your abundance wealth community. And I was checking out your website, and you're doing some really amazing work, but it looks like you have three pillars that you really formed your work on. One of them was communities, you just talked about a little bit, but talk about the other two pillars and really what you focus on in the abundance wealth community.
Yeah, first of all, I focus on helping other parents. As a dad, I'm just naturally gravitated to working with other parents because I know the challenges of raising kids in BC, and BC stands for bring cash or bring credit. So if you don't bring either of those when you come here, just don't bother, because we just pay more for everything, including gas, you name it. So I just love to teach people things. And the more I can, think of finance as a tool in your toolbox. So the more knowledge you have, the better decisions you can make for yourself. Like every parent with a kid between the ages of 6 and 9 can get free $1,200 grant from the BC government just by filling out a form. But how many families do you imagine don't fill that out and don't even know that's there, or don't take advantage of that? Just by lifting a little finger, you get $1,200 for your kid's future, and that will grow, of course, over 20 years. So it's things like that, like helping parents with tools. And the community we talked about, I'll tell a little bit more about that. So going from that trajectory as a selfish kid who didn't give back much and took things for granted, wasn't grateful. So based on my mom, she kind of taught me, like, we don't need more stuff, right? Especially in our developed world, my mom would often give me birthday presents like, I bought an acre of rainforest for you in Costa Rica through the Nature Foundation. So that's a great birthday present, actually, right? Who needs more stuff collecting dust in your room? So what I do now is when I have a chat with a new person, whether or not they become a client, I give back to one of their favorite charities. And that's just a way to connect with them and show that, this is a great way to give back to the community by having that chat together. And I do that on birthdays as well. So I've learned tons about different charities, which has been really interesting. You name it, there's so many different passions that people have that they want to support. And the third pillar would be socially responsible investments. And what do you understand about socially responsible investments, Alan?
Social responsible investments would be investments that, to me, mean that they're doing things that are supporting either the producer or right at the very beginnings part of the whole process. And so it's looking at not just the widget that's being made, but how does the whole life cycle and the supply chain is managed to it. So to me, that's what that would be. Am I getting close to it? Is that hot or cold, or where am I sitting with that description?
Definitely warmer. Yeah, exactly. Well, just quite simply, why do we invest? We invest to make more money for ourselves. Well, when we invest in a socially responsible way, we not only get a win for our own portfolio, but we get a win for the other two P's, our planet and other people. There's a community credit union here in Vancouver that might not give a loan to a business that's looking for a loan if that business does not pay its employees a living wage. That's an example. When you go to Starbucks now, they have fair trade coffee. So you don't just want a tasty cup of Joe, you want to know that you're helping that farmer make a living wage to support their family. There's a mining company in South America that gave Wi-Fi to this school in the middle of nowhere and tablets to all the kids and connected them for the first time to the internet. And obviously that costs the company money, but hey, 6 months down the road, when that mine was in production, you did not have those local people protesting the mine saying, hey, they were cut out of the profits. So that it's actually, it all dovetails back to each other, because if you take care of that community, if you take care of your employees, if you take care of other stakeholders, it will actually feed into your profits. So there's no reason that we can't have a win-win for everyone. Instead of looking at it like zero sum like traditionally we have as human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that perspective of what you're saying, and it's really looking at how can we win on both sides of that equation, not only increasing wealth for ourselves and our personal families, but also for the families of the communities that the wealth is being generated from. And so we're helping elevate their standard of living as well. And I think that's a different take on what traditional investments are all about. And that's why I know I was really intrigued about wanting to talk to you about this different perspective. And as the world continues to shape and evolve, I think it's important. As I don't know if we're going to ever get away from the idea of some form of a currency or a money concept. And so, how do we put it to better use? How can we become, more diligent with how we spend and use those resources in order to prosper everyone, and then, as you said, the planet and people. So this took a little while for you to get to this point in your life also, and in your career. But what would be a piece of advice that you would give a new father to be thinking about, back 20 years ago? What would be some advice you would give a new father to be, and maybe even some veteran guys like us, about how to create financial security for your family while also taking care of the type of investments you're doing?
For any new parent, I would say there's just things you need to learn about managing your finances if you haven't already learned those. And it's never really too late to learn, even for older guys, because the most important thing is having that mindset to be open to learning and be open to potential change. So what I'd love to share with other parents is just, if you feel some fear about your finances, or there's things you're uncertain about, but you're kind of neglecting that, or you're kind of sweeping that under the rug, then have that, meet someone. Doesn't have to be myself, but just talk to someone in the industry and get some ideas. Because if you can get your money working for you, that's powerful, right? What would imagine for you, Alan, if your parents had been saving $100 a month from when you were born? That would have been a huge amount of money, right? And it's not a lot to put away, but think about how that could set you up. So just little things like that. And I guess just to go in, just in general, when I'm in my business, money is very personal. In fact, we joke about American sitcoms and game talk shows. They kind of go on, they talk about their sex lives, but then money is like even more personal than sex, isn't it? Like, and then when you meet someone and they share their financial information with you, like, this is my credit situation, my debt situation, my investments, and people are often embarrassed. And so it's key for me not to judge, because when someone shows you their finances, they're getting naked with you. And I would love to be able to meet people with less fear on their part, so they could be more open. Because if people are open, I can help them more. So just say, be open to improvement, be open to changing things, and that's how we make progress.
Oh, that's so powerful. I just love that what you just said there is about the fearfulness of and the vulnerability we have around me. And you're absolutely right. In today's world, nothing for us to see on talk show with people talking about sex and some of the, is that my child or not, and stuff. But when it comes to money, it's even more personal, right? And we really have an attachment to an identity of who we are, or our relationship, I should say, is to money. And I think, doing this work and coming from this position, being a much more holistic and broader view helps, take away and helps us reshape and redefine our relationship with money. And so I think that is such a key takeaway from what I'm getting you're saying. And would you say that's part of your conversation as well, as really about helping people understand that relationship that they have, and being able to change that mindset?
I'd say the challenge is, if people don't have that mindset, it's really hard to bridge with them. But when people do have that mindset, it's a wonderful process to see that sharing. So, when you have a client crying in your office because they told you about how they grew up poor and they couldn't play hockey because their parents didn't have money to send them to ice hockey, that's really powerful when people share those things with you. So I would just say I approach that with reverence and dignity, and when people share about their past, like that's really special to me, and I really value that. And that's how we get at what you want to achieve, because everybody wants more money, but that's not enough. What's more important is the Alan behind the money, and what are the values and that you have. What do you want your life to look like? Here's a question I often ask people. Let's imagine that you're a grandpa now, or grandpa age, even if you didn't have kids, and you're looking back on your life, how would you say to yourself that I done good, that I lived a good life and I did the things that mattered to me? And I love to ask those free-forming questions to people, because that really gets back to that love that you mentioned, that gets our creative side and our creative faculties going, and really gets those wonderful conversations happening. And then from there, I'm able to help people design, the plan that they want that will help them achieve those values.
Absolutely. Geez, I just like that about the talking about really getting an understanding of, and we actually opened up this conversation today talking about being in alignment with our values, not just ourselves and our own values and relationship with money, but also with our spouses and our family, so that we can move along together. And it doesn't mean we necessarily need to agree with everything with each other, but we have an understanding of the path forward and the path that makes sense for our families. And I think, today, as we look at how much the world is changing, and it's always changing, but I think we're on this precipice of even more greater change, that being able to be financially secure or have a path forward, working with yourself and your organization to help people, invest consciously, invest in things that make sense and do well for themselves and their children, I think is really needed today, more so than just going out and learning and getting a course on how to buy real estate. And while it solves one part of the equation, it may not necessarily be as fulfilling. So
exactly. I love that, what you just said. And just to add to that, I think the biggest thing I can do is give people hope, because if you have hope, you have everything. And look at Hollywood. I don't want to point a finger, but they have fame, fortune, beauty, everything, and people are taking their own lives or overdosing. So how much unhappiness and rot really is there in the underbelly if you peel back some of the layers? So it's, we all go through those times when we feel despair or we feel depressed about the future. So our job as humans is to give each other hope and to lift each other up, because life, shit happens in life and bad things happen, but let's not focus on that. Let's focus on the good. So I'm always trying to, I don't want to talk about myself too much, but what things that I love to do, I just love to, I've helped like 3 or 4 people get jobs in the past few years, just because I know people and I can connect them. So if that's not my role is to find you a job, but if you're my client and you're looking for one, then hey, and I can help you do that, that's great. So those are things I love to do, because let's make this world a better place. Let's put more smiles on each other's faces. And, I've recently put a blog post about rules to live by. And one of my rules to live by is I don't honk my horn at people anymore, because that's like giving them the finger. And do you walk down the street giving people the finger? Like, why would you do that? Spread happiness, don't spread the negative emotions.
Oh man, I love that. The proverbial finger, giving the finger with the horn. I never put that. That is exactly what it's all about. I love that. What a great analogy. You talked about earlier about, you did a lot of work with yourself, right? From being a young man, and then developing and growing as a man into the man you are today. So you must have read a few books along the way, but tell me, what book's on your nightstand right now, and what are you reading, and what's really inspiring you?
Oh gosh, well, actually, what I'm reading now is 1930s Pulp Fiction.
Got to take a break from the heavy stuff,
Definitely, there's been, in terms of Stephen Covey has been great. His 7 Habits, that was really impactful. I've read a ton of books. I would say not so much book, but what I've gone through recently, thanks to my coach Maddie, she's a certified mental fitness coach. Her name's Madeline Brown, and she introduced me to mental fitness, and that's really, you can look that up. It's called Positive Intelligence, and that's talking about a lot of things that we've been talking about lately. So I think that's really uppermost in my mind, because I want to drive away those feelings of negativity, of panic, of despair, and I want to just surround myself with good emotions. I want to surround myself with people who share those emotions. I don't know if that's quite the answer you wanted, but yeah, I'd say a lot of the books I've been reading are mostly like business books. So they talk about things like being disciplined and being accountable and putting in the time and getting the results, which makes sense for business. That not so much about the things that we're talking about, though, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Right on. I'm always interested to see what folks are reading, and I read too much for knowledge and not don't take enough time to read for pleasure. So I've made a conscious effort in the last, well, it's been a while since we've been on vacation, but we made a conscious effort on the previous one is to take something to read that was for pleasure. I wasn't trying to learn about a skill or a task, for business or marketing or whatever, but to read for pleasure. So I'm grateful to hear that somebody else is taking that opportunity just to, to do something different. And it doesn't always have to be about, self-improvement stuff. So it's pretty cool. I love that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, actually, I think that's great. Yeah, you do need to have some Doritos for the mind here and there. I do have a book. Yeah, it's called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. I don't know if you've read that.
I know of Wallace Wattles. I've seen it before. I was thinking of the other book you talked about earlier, where you were talking about stuff. Wrote down The Richest Man in Babylon, and that's a really old book as well. And it talks about how to investing and all that. It's kind of in the same model of how Og Mandino used to write his books, and the little executive style books about 120 odd pages long, and great little read. But absolutely
cool. Thanks for sharing that. I'll look that up.
Yeah. So along the way, you must have received some pretty interesting and some word advice and words of wisdom. So tell me about what's the best piece of advice you've been given, and how has it served you today?
Do you mean from like a book or a person?
Could be anywhere. Yeah, book, person, maybe you're meditating and it came to you.
I would just when I was researching your podcast and listening to a few episodes, I would really say it's what you're focusing on, which is the values, because look at any dysfunction in the world today, and it's due to people being out of alignment with their values. Because if you're in alignment with, it's like a disease, right? So if you're in alignment with your values, then that product, what you do in society and community, will be something positive that you're contributing. And if you're out of alignment, then something's wrong there. And I've just seen that. What's an example? These are kind of strong examples to share, but on my kids' baseball team, two of the parents seemed like amazing, beautiful people, and their son was my son's friend. And then 6 months later, they're divorced, and the family home is sitting empty. And I'm riding by on my bike, and I see the for sale sign. I'm just thinking, how do we dig at what the unhappiness is there, and why did it have to get to this point? Like, why is that family now being broken apart? So I really just want to, like you talk about in your podcast, it's not all money is just one facet of our lives, and it maybe if people were focusing on money or focusing on what people think about them or keeping up with the Joneses or focusing on making good appearances and impressing other people online or on social media, I think those things that would cause lack of alignment, and that would cause unhappiness in relationships. I'm thinking that it's something along that lines. You're the expert in this, so teach me something.
Yeah, no, listen, I think that was really good. I like that. Advice. I like to ask the question because it's when we stop to think about it, it can come from so many different places, right? And sometimes when I ask that question, people think that, well, was it a specific mentor in that? But it can, I've even thought of just what my son has said. So, in our, example for me is that I have a 28-year-old or 29-year-old son, and we struggle with our communication, or at least we used to, until I recognized, and he was able to help me understand that his way of communicating was through texting, and specifically through Messenger. Now, I'm not a big fan of that, but if I want to create connection with my son, then why am I going to buck that system and try to force him to do something that he's uncomfortable with? And so as I started to engage him in that, well, guess what ends up by happening? Now the phone rings a little bit more. That's my preferred way, right? But if I didn't step into it, and so he was able to give me that insight, that piece of advice on, Dad, this is how I communicate, this is how I would prefer. And so I think as long as we're open, really the idea of the question is, how open are we to seeing the gold nuggets that are around us in each and every moment of the day, and they exist. And sometimes we get that bolt of lightning where, the mentor just happens to say something, or maybe you listen to a podcast and it made something click, and that's great too. And so, I think your response is outstanding, and it's in alignment with everything we've been talking about today. And so, I want to finish our conversation today with asking this one, is that of everything that we've spoken of, and maybe something we didn't get a chance to touch on, what would be a piece of advice that you would want our listeners to take with them as a remembrance of our conversation?
That's really great. We just shared. Thank you for that. That's powerful. Because you learn to bend a little bit like bamboo, and then it just opened up that so much space between you and your son, instead of that confrontation that was there before. And that really brought to mind something. A great way to wrap up our chat today is, if we talk about going back to the power of advice, a lot of books and a lot of people told me and taught me how to listen. So I'd say for now, now the first time in my life, I really know how to listen, and I love to get curious about people's lives and ask questions. And I found my own narrative was very stale. Like, I don't want to tell 10 different people what I did on vacation. I find it's boring talking about myself. It's so much more fun to dig into other people and learn about them. And when someone tells you something like, I don't like sushi, and instead of saying, oh yeah, I don't like it either, or really, I love it, dig into that. Why don't you like sushi? Or what about sushi don't you like? And keep asking those questions, like, why do you feel that way? Or what made you be that way? And that's like, it just sparks a new understanding between people. Because when people feel listened, they feel heard, that's how you create strong relationships with people. And that's been very impactfful for me.
And I love that. Exactly. That's so awesome. I love how you finished that up, being curious, right? You're asking us to be curious and really get to know other people. And because, the most interesting people in the world are the ones that can know how to do what you just said, listen, ask great questions. So just want to say thank you so much, Max, for spending time with us today. And I think we've been able to provide men with a better understanding of how, they can start to support their families in developing a sustainable financial plan, not just the plan itself, but also in looking at how we invest and the types of companies that we invest in. So if folks are interested in getting a hold of you and in participating in your work, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, my website, community.com, really has all the information you need to know about how I help people like yourself in the community. And my whole process is complimentary, so I don't charge you for my time. And if you go through that process learning something and you don't become a client, that's perfectly fine. The main thing for me is like just to have that win-win in teaching you something, because I look at myself as an educator above all. So check out my website or check me out on LinkedIn. And I'm always here to answer questions, or if you something you want my opinion about or to bounce off me, I'd love to connect with you and share that with you.
Outstanding. Love that. I'll make sure that information's in the show notes for today's episode. Once again, I just want to say thanks a lot, Max, for being on the show. Really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thanks so much for having me on. It was a wonderful chat. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.